Welcome to Successful Philanthropy. I'm Jean Shafiroff, your host. Today with us, a fascinating and intriguing guest. His name, Gerry Cooney. And Gerry is a former champion boxer and he's a philanthropist. He also happens to be a man with a big heart and a lot of personality. Let's all welcome Gerry Cooney. And Gerry, what a delight to have you on our show today. And thank you. First, I want to say thank you. And Gerry, how did you begin with the boxing?
Well, that's a great question. And when I was a little kid, I grew up in a very rough, tough Irish Catholic family. My father was a big drinker and he was very physical. And so we grew up with a lot of fear and a lot of anger. And what I was to find out was boxing helped me to express my anger, what was going on in my house. And then they put my picture in the paper. When I was 16, I entered into the New York State Golden Glove Championship. And every fight, I would be at the newsstand the next morning and my picture was on the back page of the Daily News. And then that made me somebody. So boxing helped me to express my anger. And then they put my picture in the paper. It made me somebody and it fed me and kept me alive. So it was a great experience for me because I was a kind of a afraid kid growing up. I was, unsure, and boxing helped me to develop all those skills.
Now, I read on your Wikipedia page that your father actually encouraged you and your brother to become fighters. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, obviously, my father wanted to be a fighter in the Merchant Marines, and my older brother left the home when he was 15 because he couldn't take it anymore. And then 3 years later, he started going to a gym, and I loved my brother, so I followed him there. And one day I was in the gym and I said, can I box somebody? And they put me in there with some kid who'd been boxing for 6 years. And he smacked me around. I threw the gloves off, said, forget it. But I went home and went down in the basement, hit the heavy bag, understanding the guy was going to come at me. So the next couple of days, I went back to the gym, asked if I could box that kid again, except he couldn't do that to me anymore. And then 6 months later, I went into the New York State Golden Glove Championships and won the middleweight title. It was the greatest night of my life.
And you were 16 then?
16 years old, 6'4", 160 pounds. You had to wet me down and see me, but I could punch.
And were you self-taught? Are you saying that you were a self-taught boxer?
Well, I went to a gym. The guy was a rough guy. I'm left-handed, so I was supposed to fight with my right hand leading, but I didn't know that. So I just fought with my left hand leading. And so what it turned out to be was a converted southpaw, which happened to become a blessing because all my power was in my left hand. And I jab 80 times in the fight if I throw 100 punches, and I punch with my right hand 20. So it turned out to be a blessing for me, and it helped me to move up the ladder a lot faster.
Yes, and I'm a left-handed person too. And they say about left-handed people, well, your brain goes on forever. I think President Reagan and a lot of very interesting people. Now, Gerry, you became famous at the age of 16. You mentioned you were on the cover of the Daily News or the back cover many, many times.
Many times.
How did that feel like? You were 16 years old, you were a kid, and all of a sudden you became famous. Did it go to your head or did you were you humble about it?
No, I didn't go to my head because I never had the confidence. I always had to fight hard. And so from my upbringing, I got a lot of negative, reactions from my father, who kind of knocked us down to control us. Little did he know. And so boxing was my way out. And I got to go to a gym and fight other guys and learn about myself and build my own confidence. And that's what happened to me. I got to go to a gym and learn about myself, my confidence. And someone told me, listen, you're a good fighter. Pay attention. And it helped me out a lot in the amateurs. I won the Golden Gloves twice. I made it to the finals 3 times. And then I became ranked in the top as an amateur heavyweight. And I was telling you earlier, I went to Europe, had 4 fights, 4 knockouts. And I came home. And they told me to stay in shape. The Russians were coming. So I went into the ring with the 3rd-ranked Russian heavyweight champ, knocked him out in 1 round. And then the president of the Olympic Committee told me I made the finals. And I told him, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to go. He said, what are you talking about? This is the finals of Olympic trials. And I had no confidence in myself. I didn't think I could do well. It's the biggest regret of my life. I tell kids today, follow your dreams. Don't quit on yourself. And I didn't go. And maybe I couldn't have made it, but I didn't take the shot. And that's the whole deal about life. We have to jump in the water to swim.
No question. And when you look back on that, you regret it now, but maybe it was the right decision. But I agree with you. You have to dream big, and you have to take the shot, and you have to give life a chance and not back down. But you were young. And how old were you when that opportunity to try out for the Olympics came your way?
I was 18,
You were
17,
very
18 years
young.
old. Yeah. And my father was sick, and, so I didn't go, and I regret that. And there's another big moment in my life that, in my professional career, I'm ranked #1 in the world. And I get into the ring with Kenny Norton in the Garden, and I knock him out in 54 seconds of the first round. And I'm ranked #1 in the world. I'm going to get a shot with Larry Holmes for the heavyweight championship of the world. You think I would have found a new trainer, got a nutritionist, someone to condition coach? No, I started drinking. And I don't know whether that was fear or self-destruction, but it cost me the heavyweight championship of the world. And
Now, yes, you're known for your fight with Larry Holmes. And how old
slowly
were
I
you?
turned.
I'm sorry?
Slowly I turned step by step. You remember Abbott and Costello?
Yes.
Go ahead. We'll just move along. I'm sorry.
Well, no, you were known for you're known for your fight with Larry Holmes.
Yes.
And I want you to tell our audience a little bit about that fight and why it became such a sensation.
It's a great question. I was coming up in the ranks out of New York. They hadn't had a great fighter out of New York. Larry Holmes had been to my gym. I've told him before, when you're fighting and you're planning on fighting each other, sometimes you're kind of playing chess with each other. And I was telling him, listen, anytime you want someone to work with, I'll be glad to come with you. But I'm playing with him. And he was a great champion. I mean, like the second best or third best of all time. And I was getting the opportunity to fight him. And it turned out to be a big racial nightmare. Now, I'm a young kid. I'm in Vegas. I'm 24, 25 years old. I'm living the dream. I'm eating turtle soup and lobster tail. There's no racism in my camp. There was no racism in his camp. Obviously, he didn't like me. I wasn't so crazy about him either. But, this is what happened. They made it a racial thing, and, it got ugly. But the big part about it for me, Gene, is when we were in the center of the ring and Mills Lane was giving us instructions. Larry Holmes looked at me, and the great champion he was, he said, Gerry, let's have a good fight. That's boxing at the top. Now, I didn't want him to say that to me. I wanted to be angry going in there. But, listen, this was a great championship fight. It was the biggest fight in history at that time. And I was in it. It was very exciting for me to be fighting for that kind of money and to get the opportunity to become heavyweight champion of the world. Now, I got stopped in the 13th round that night, but in today's standards, if the fight we had, we would have had a trilogy. We would have had a second and a third fight. And what I learned from Holmes that night in the ring, it was invaluable. I really learned how to fight that night in my loss to him. And I could have taken that into a rematch. It never happened. That's my big regret.
Yes, and I read that you resisted this whole racial thing, and you hated that, and you were against that. You fought against that, and then you and Larry Holmes became very good friends and remain very good friends. And I admire you for that. And no question, in today's world, we would never want something like that. Back then, I'm surprised that even happened. And here you were a subject, as what I would say.
Well, I can tell you what happened was Don King, who was the promoter, wanted to make a lot of money. So he promoted that, and he made it ugly. But, I'm in Vegas. I'm in Palm Springs, California with 6 or 7 of the guys I grew up with. I'm living the dream. I'm running in the morning. I'm eating good. I'm training good. I didn't have no time for that. And neither did Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes is a great champion. 7.5 years. He was the best fighter in the world. Like I told you, we rate him 2 or 3 in history. And I got a chance to fight him. And afterwards, I was disappointed I lost. I got stopped in the 13th round. And we became friends. And we talked to each other all the time. And we are promoting the game. Boxing is great today, in part from that fight we had.
Yes. Now, some people, I mean, I'm not a big promoter of people fighting with one another, but I recognize that this is a sport and it's a very popular sport. You've done a lot outside of boxing to encourage people not to get involved in things like domestic violence. And I think that's so very important. People have to say, well, over here is boxing, and then over here is real life. For our audience, we are with Gerry Cooney, and he's telling us a little bit of his life as a boxer. And my next question to him is really about the work that he's done to encourage people to keep their hands off one another outside of the boxing ring, meaning to avoid any kind of domestic conflicts.
Gene, thank you so much for bringing that up. And listen, I'm fortunate, and many of my peers, ex-celebrities, celebrities, sports guys, we have a right to help the less fortunate people become aware of what's right and wrong sometimes. Now, physical abuse is just not right. No one should put their hands on anybody. We got to once around. There's no do-overs. This is our life now. And no one has the right to put their hands on you. And so hitting it, is wrong. That was a big thing I championed. But I mean, I've also championed so many charity events through my long career. And I think it's a responsibility that we have. I speak in prisons. I do all of that stuff to let people know that there's another way, that we don't have to keep falling down. We can get up, dust off our pants, and move on. I did it in the fight game. I lost to Larry Holmes. I didn't win. But I had to learn from that mistake, and I couldn't stay stuck for too long. I had to get up, dust off my pants, and get help and move on. And that was my experience. And that's what we promote. That's what we try and do, to tell people, listen, let's get to work. You got to change. There's no do-overs for you. This is it. This is the big one. Let's get the information now. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I love that you're involved in ending domestic violence. And really, domestic violence has many forms. Besides physical abuse, there's also emotional abuse or mental abuse. And the two go hand in hand, unfortunately. And I remember a number of years ago, I serve on 9 charity boards, and one that I remain active with, I'm a Catholic, but I was on the board of the Jewish board for 28 years. I'm now an honorary trustee of that charity. And I sat on a domestic violence committee for 2 years. And Larry, you're so right. Gerry, you're so right. There is so much that we can do outside of just living to help others so that domestic violence doesn't continue, because many people don't realize, but it's very much a generational thing. If someone's father abused him, or the mother abused him or her, chances are that person is going to grow up and abuse his or her children. And so the cycle of abuse has to stop, and people need to be trained and told that they can't do this. And I just love that you're involved with this. Now, Gerry, I also read that you had started a charity a number of years ago to help fighters once their careers ended. And what a wonderful thing to do. Besides helping people in the arena of domestic violence, here you were, a former fighter, and you took your time, your wherewithal, and I'm sure your money, and you started a charity to help fighters. I want to hear more about that.
Well, thank you, Gene. And you know what? I just want to say that people who come from abuse, they don't think it's abusive. They need to learn about that. And that's what we're working towards. Listen, I founded charity in part. I got to tell you something. It was selfish because I was looking to get out of the game and I didn't know what to do with myself either. So I figured it was a perfect scenario to sit down with a great, we formed a great organization, and we sat and met every month and talked about what we can do to help these guys get on track after the game is over. See, the problem with boxing is that your managers pay your bills, your managers take care of the insurance, they take care of everything, and and you think, well, this is great. Look at, they're taking care of me. But then comes the day when you're not making it anymore in a fight game, and you're forgotten about. And the manager's taking care of a young guy, and you're left out in the cold, and you're lost, and you're scared, and you're afraid. And we need to help those guys. And those guys need to go to the commissions in their local states and find out what they're signing, and find out what kind of help is available to them. See, the management and the promoters, they want to keep you dumb so you're dependent upon them. But that day comes when it's over, and we have to be prepared for that. And that was something I was fortunate to have. I had two managers that couldn't stand each other. So I had one watch the other, because I always knew the rainy day was coming. The rainy day was coming for all of us. And I put my money aside. I didn't spend my money. Took care of myself, and I got out. We all get knocked down. You have to get up and move on. And I was fortunate enough to do that. But a lot of these guys aren't, and they keep coming back. And, we see Muhammad Ali, who passed away. He was the greatest athlete of all time, I feel. But he took too many shots because he couldn't get away from the game. He kept coming back for the attention. And fighters, we all say, well, I'm going to become a champion of the world. Then most guys realize, well, I'm not going to be the champion. Let me be a contender. Then that comes out, and then you become an opponent, and then you become a sparring partner, but you're taking all these shots to the head that are long lasting in your life, which allow you not to fill your dream and become a father and a parent, and all the things that we're afforded are supposed to be afforded. These guys don't know. So we're trying to change that around.
Well, I love that you did this. Is the charity still around today?
The charity closed down. We had hired somebody who stole money from us, and we paid our bills all off. And there was such a struggle with these guys, because a lot of these guys, they were only learned, give me money, give me money, give me money. But the story is, if you teach a man to fish, you can feed him for life. And it's so difficult to make. There was a mental, substance abuse, spousal, there's a lot of stuff to work through. And we helped a lot of people, but it had to end. And listen, I've often talked about this. I'm so glad you brought it up. Is if these promoters put $1 for every ticket in a foundation throughout the year, you would have enough money, way over, to help these guys get back to school and get caught up and have a productive life for themselves. But for some reason, they're not doing it. And that's what we were striving for, and it couldn't get done. So hopefully something's changing. I think that boxing is in a much better state today than it was back then. And hopefully they're addressing those issues now.
Gerry, yes, I think there's a problem always when people transition from one career to another. And for the boxers, it's hard. It was just as hard for anybody else, even though many of them were famous and had very lucrative careers. It's difficult. Now, Gerry, you have a family. I understand you have 3 children, 2 boys and a daughter.
Yeah.
Are any of them involved in fighting? And you have a wonderful wife. I don't want to exclude her.
Thank you. I got a great wife, right? And I have 3 great children. One is MMA. He's the oldest boy. He's 34. But my 2 young children, Sarah, who's 20, and my son, Jackson, is 23. They've been in the gym. All my 3 children, they know how to fight. I taught them how to protect themselves. It builds self-confidence. Not that I wanted them to fight, but I wanted them to learn how to defend themselves. And through that process, you develop self-esteem, and you have a confidence about yourself that helps you in other areas of your life. And that's the story for me. And I work with kids and people, and I would love to train a professional at some time. But, listen, the family system is broken down. We need to help kids, give them a place to come, work out, learn about yourself, develop skills to take on with you in the rest of your life. And that's what we need to do. That's what I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be able to do with kids.
So you're a mentor to children.
Oh, I love it. I never got this information. I always wanted it, and now I'm able to give it. And in some ways, it heals that person inside of me that was, neglected and abused. It helps that guy heal some more too. So it's a two-way street.
Yes, and for our audience, we are with Gerry Cooney. He is a former champion boxer, and also he's a philanthropist. And Gerry is talking about his life as a boxer, also about his philanthropy and the work he does to help those who maybe need a mentor, or he had a charity for boxers who were transitioning out of boxing, help them to find new careers. And when you give, you get. And it's so interesting to hear firsthand from Gerry Cooney about how giving has truly enriched his life. And for all of us, never forget, and I say this all the time, when you reach out to another individual by sharing or by being kind, well, it makes you feel good. It makes you feel good inside, and you're helping. And that doesn't take any money to do. That just takes a little interest and a little time in those around you. And maybe you'll get involved in something where you'll be helping. Maybe you'll join a charity, and maybe you'll be able to help people that you'll never see. But the feeling you receive when you give, you can't even
It's invaluable.
express
It's invaluable.
it. Exactly.
Mhm.
Yes. So, Gerry, we have a little more time left. And what advice do you give to a young person who maybe grew up like you in a situation where there was very little support in the household?
Mhm.
You mentioned your father was abusive and
Mhm.
was not supportive, and I guess he wanted you to fight. I guess he wanted you to protect yourself because he encouraged you and your brother to become fighters. But what advice are you going to give to the children that might be watching this show?
And it was told to me by a good friend of mine, a retired cop. He said, no matter what my father did to me and what we went through, he made me become number one in the world. He helped me with his whatever that tough love was or whatever he gave me, is that we have to get information. I heard somebody say one time, can you help me? You got to ask that question. And when you do, there'll always be somebody there to help you. And it's a learned thing. And we're going to read, and we're going to do these different things to be around the right people. And then we open the door for ourselves, and we can move on and to do something else.
Yes, and I say to the parents watching this show, make sure you show love to your children. Be good role models, because what you do, they're going to pick up. And never forget that the biggest role models for children are their parents and, of course, their teachers. So you want to make sure you're a good role model so that your children will thrive in the future. And whatever you do, the time you spend with your children, well, it will pay off in many ways in their future. And children never forget the time their parents spent with them and the good that their parents did for them. And Gerry, for someone who wants to go into a boxing career, what advice do you give to them?
I tell them, go to a gym and watch the trainers. And who's ever teaching defense, that's the person you want to get with. That's the person you want to get your children with, because they're teaching how to defend themselves. My children, they're good fighters, but they're defensive wise. So they have confidence. If you're not defensive and you're taking hits, you don't feel like you want to do it. But if you learn to protect yourself, you can box with anybody. And that's love. And that's really what you want to do. That's building self-confidence and giving these kids the courage to, it's a tough life. It's a tough world we're in. It gives them the courage to jump over that hurdle and get to the next place and to ask for help and use the tools that you're given and growing through life with.
And what about when you're long gone, and that'll be maybe 50 years from now?
At least.
But what would you want to be remembered for?
I've been a fighter all my life, and I love people. I've always loved people. I mean, from the sanitation workers, when I used to run when I was a kid, they'd be beeping the horn at me, and I loved those people, the hardworking people. And that, you know, I want to be available to the person who needs something that I can pass on to them that's going to make their life a little less stressful. See, when I grew up, there was none of that. I had to find my own way, and I made a lot of mistakes. But we learn through experience, and to make someone's ride a little bit easier, I mean, there's nothing like that in the world.
And your words are so heartwarming, and
Thank you.
You might be my most inspiring person I've ever interviewed. And I love that you want to be remembered for your career, which was boxing, but you also want to be remembered for being a kind-hearted and caring individual and someone who really wanted to help others. And I love your spirit. I love that you love people. I love people. I feel very blessed, and I feel I must give back, and I want to do and try to be helpful, and hopefully I am in some way. But this interview is about you, Gerry, and
Thank you, Jean.
you've been so incredibly inspiring to me, and I think to our audience. And I just want to thank you for everything you've done. And 2 minutes left. What do you want to leave us with?
Jean, you know, I heard that person say, "Can you help me?" We have to fight. There's no free ride. It's hard sometimes, but we have to persevere through it. And we don't have to do it alone. There's always somebody available to us. And, you know, life is short. Let's live. And that's my hope for today, that people can hear from me that, yeah, life is a struggle, but it doesn't have to stick us. We can move on, and we can grow and be helpful, and to change, and to love, and to be intimate, and to all those things that we're supposed to be afforded. And I thank you, Jean, for having me on today. It's been a great experience for me too.
Gerry, you've been a wonderful guest. Today's guest, Gerry Cooney. He is a former boxer,
Don't say George Clooney. Don't say George Clooney, would you?
I said Gerry Cooney.
I'm just kidding.
Yes, your name is so close. Tell me, do people confuse the two of you?
Let me tell you a story. So years ago, David Letterman was introducing George Clooney on his show, but he introduced him Gerry Cooney. It was for me, it was a great experience to have him, George Clooney, the famous dude, come out as Gerry Cooney. They had a nice little conversation. It was a lot of laughs. And obviously, listen, I love who I am. I love what I'm doing. And that's what I want to promote. People got to love what you're doing. You got to keep moving. You look so happy right now. You love being in that seat, and I don't blame you. You belong there.
Well, thank you. And Gerry Cooney and George Clooney, two great men. But today with us was Gerry Cooney. He's a former champion boxer, a philanthropist, and a most inspirational man.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerry.
You,
and this concludes Successful Philanthropy. I'm your host, Jean Shafiroff. I'll see you next week.